stay up all night. The things you could do. You won't, but you might. The potential you'll be. You'll never see. Promises you'll only make.
I think I'll do a process podcast. There's a little music in the background there. Pardon me while I'm learning to control the levels. I probably shouldn't have my mic close to my mouse either, but these refinements will come in time. Evening. So, hey, open my lights. Oh yeah, I unplugged them. Oh, there we are. So I just had a fun experiment. As I mentioned a second ago, I'm in Montreal, and the Montreal Comic Jam. Sorry, not the Montreal Comic Jam. I used to host the Montreal Comic Jam a long time ago now. And it continued to go on for quite some time after I retired from hosting it. And relatively recently, they put it to bed. But there are other jams in Montreal, the Dump and Draws and the Drink and Draws, and those are both themes of events. And there used to be the Astro Jam. I think they still occasionally meet up. Toronto still's got the monthly Toronto Comic Jam. Vancouver monthly Comic Jam has been going on for ages. Jason Turner there has been hosting it for a long time. He's an old acquaintance, a friend of mine. And I was thinking about, because, pardon me, a little hoarse. I'm a small stallion. Primarily was thinking that so way back in the day, Rupert Bottenberg and David at the Toronto Comic Jam and some others. I remember having conversations about how it'd be fun to have an international multi-city jam coordinate things at the same time. And, you know, the internet was there, but the tech wasn't quite there. It was clunky. We would have to send JPEGs to each other and stuff. We kind of messed around with a bit. There was a jam from Montreal Comic Jams that we got some New Yorkers and Toronto folks to contribute panels to, but there was a lot of delay in it, a lot of lag in it. It wasn't fluid. So the Vancouver Comic Jam had a quarantine jam just this evening, wrapped up a couple hours ago. For them, it was earlier in the evening, but I'm several hours later than them. So it was late evening for me, but that's okay. I'm a late evening person. And then the tools we used were pretty cool. So Zoom, everyone's using Zoom, right? I've been using it for teaching. And then they're also using, I don't know how you spell it. Let me look at it and say it, looking at it. Aggie? AGGIE.io. It's a drawing app website. And once you create an account, each drawing you create is a unique URL. And you can share the URL with friends. And then it's like a dumbed down Photoshop or Painter program, and with layers. So each user can have a layer. You can kind of steal people's layers, but you don't necessarily want to in a jam. So you can name your layer with your name so you can keep track of it, and you can do a panel, and you can import page templates. So I've got pre-drawn Comic Jam templates that I did back in the day. Here, let me show you what I'm talking about. That's probably the quicker thing to do, right? Just show. So I took screen caps. Where are we here? I had it here a second ago. Which one was it again? Oh, I didn't pay attention, did I? All right, 1 second now. I think, was it this one? No. This is it. There we are. So, this is my desktop. Hello. Something I'm about to work on. I'll mention that in a minute. This is a very informal process podcast. Sometimes I do a more formal preamble, but I've been hanging out and chatting with folks. So this is Agi, and that's one of the pages we drew together on it. I actually just imported it again. You can save the pages, but you save them as a ping file that you download. And then you can you can keep the URL and pass it around, and people can keep drawing to it. But that's sort of a way to default backup your version of a panel or page in case we've noticed there's a few potential glitches. It's a web-based drawing program, so there can be some issues, but mostly it worked quite well. I'll look forward to it. And there's a transform tool, so you can resize, cut and paste and resize things. That would be a nice addition, but as it is, it's pretty effective. And this is the other screenshot. This was all the jammers and Zoom. So we had that running, and then we each had Agi opened in another window, and we're able to kind of do the two things and hang out and chat and talk. And when you don't have the feature, it's all in the gallery mode. You don't have the audio feature on. It's not too bad at cutting people off in a weird way. You can actually have a good kind of going conversation. You know what? It's actually kind of better than a bar or cafe, because in a bar or cafe, you really only can talk to the people right across the table from you, and it's just a loud one. That can even be hard. A loud bar. Not a problem here. I was able to play music quietly in the background, so I had my own ambient music. I could have my own things, and then the jammers could all hang out. It was quite pleasant. It worked really well. I think it's a cartoonists are perhaps well suited to this kind of thing. So put them down. It has to be put on YouTube. So, but that worked real well. I felt like I should say something, and so I've already been thinking about. I'm going to pitch doing some sort of jam to an upcoming festival. I'm not going to say names because they haven't agreed to anything yet, but I'm going to pitch the idea of doing with them because they were going to try to mount events in the virtual now that we can't have an actual brick and mortar festival. I'm also teaching classes, and jamming and cartooning and making comic classes seems like, yeah, that's a thing. We should do that. That's good. And then just hanging out with my friends and jamming. Yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to... So there was a thing I did years ago called... So Montreal Comic Salon, or the Salon, or just Salon BD Montreal. And it was kind of a mashup. I used to host the jams, as I mentioned, a long time ago. It had a jam. I think the version of it that I liked the most that we did involved a stage with panels facing a large room with two long tables, kind of like, think sort of like Vikings banquet hall with two long banquet hall tables, but all cartoonists bent over their things, drawing and talking. And then there was a lot of wasn't like the stage was another space. It was kind of integrated in the people on the stage and the people in the crowd knew each other quite well. So it was some sort of like hierarchical thing. And there were a couple of panels that we organized. It didn't go off perfectly. There were some glitches, but I liked it. It was the second time we'd done it. We'd done it at the school I teach at the first year, and that kind of worked, but there were some issues. Bringing it all into one room, for the main event, had a nice vibe about it. But then at the end of that second night, I thought, it would be really good if we did have small rooms for little panels, but that didn't take away from the main, or to have all the main panels in the jam in the main room, but then have workshop rooms, to have small breakaway rooms where people would go and talk one-on-one. And then if you did like a jam on Zoom, it could be everywhere. So you could have like Canada-wide jams, for example, and then have breakout rooms for every Canadian city. So people can hang out amongst their local crowd or go join the main one or jump into some other room in another city all in one night. That's kind of cool. It works. It's got potential. I don't know how much of that I just said that I will actually do, but I think someone should do it. And then I will hang out. But I will definitely going to use some of that. I'm going to pitch that idea to the festival and be doing it myself. So that's a thing. I definitely would like to I'll be using that for my student patrons for sure, and allows us to share a drawing and go back and forth into, or notes or like visual notations while doing talking about something, like demonstrating perspective and stuff, and have them interact with the drawing and be able to do feedback that way, or maybe able to look at their drawings and have them do like exercises maybe that way. I don't know. It's not that great of a drawing program. Not everyone draws digitally, so I'm not sure that's going to work. You can drop in files, so it's a really good way to do draw overs, demos. You could use Photoshop, but the one reason I think this is interesting is that I'm going to have to look at the program a little more closely, but I think it would use less power on the system. Wouldn't have to run Photoshop. I'm usually running a browser while I'm teaching, but Photoshop's yet another program. My laptop currently is, but it does get a little taxed out doing all the things at once. I've actually gone in, so in other news, I decided to invest. I use air quotes because I got an old, cheap, like 3 or 4 year old model refurbished computer. So relatively cheap. But with a lot of oomph and room for a graphics card, so I can add one soon for fairly cheap. And I'm going to look around for, I use one of those as well. But I wanted to get a hardier system with a better cooling system, because the Zoom stuff's going really well, but I do notice that my laptop gets a little bit sweaty trying to keep up with it. So I think I'm going to give it a break, not try to drive it into the ground. And I had a tower up until last winter, but I'd kept it for 11 years. Yeah, so that was a good run. I got a very hardy workhorse in the first place. So it did its job. And I'm getting one in the same family tree, similar kind of concept. And that'll let me do multi-screen, which will really help a lot with teaching and stuff. Right now I'm kind of cramped on a small tablet, a 15.6 X Pen, basically is what I interact with. I have the laptop as well, but I can't actually run proper dual screen on it. It's should be able to, but it definitely pushes it, and then multiple programs is too much. So anyway, yeah. So I've been playing journalist. So I published a site called Sequential, the Canadian Comics News blog, and I'm not a trained journalist, but I always took a big interest in the practice, the actual sort of idealized version of it. So occasionally I play journalist for the site. Mostly it's a link blog. Mostly we collect news about people who are doing it and share it. But every once in a while we'll write something. And with everything going on, I started organizing what we call the C list. I mentioned it in my last video. And I think I mentioned the last video here. By the way, there's another new channel. Yeah, we'll go back to that. A C list is a list of Canadian comics news links. And usually I'll post art. I'll post the cartoons, comics, doodles, sketches, videos, links to articles, interviews, reviews, previews, features, op-eds, all the things, and just try to like encapsulate a Canadian perspective on comics news for the last couple of weeks usually. But sometimes it goes months. Depends on how often I'm posting them. I did one 2 weeks ago. I want to do another one. Part of an effort to just like help keep the comics industry alive in my neck of the woods. And in researching it and looking around and asking questions, I started noticing more, understandably, it's been a month and a bit for some people, and retailers are starting to get a little uncomfortable. A lot of them are talking about how, while they're glad to be able to do any business, there's a real problem with how long it'll last, because they're doing many more times the work for like 20-30% of the sales. That's an understandable problem. And then there was big news just as I was starting to look for information about the C list. DC Comics did a deal, or didn't do a deal. Well, they kind of did a deal. So they announced that they've got distribution. They've got 2 distributors, one for the East Coast, one for the West Coast. I'm going to blank on the names right now, but if you Google it, you'll find this. And they are originally reported as new distributing companies, but they're actually new distribution branches of existing discount online retailers. And so Midtown Comics is also a brick and mortar chain of stores in New York, who I have to admit, I kind of like them. They bought a lot of my books to sell. But at the same time, I know they compete online very aggressively, and retailers, of course, are pretty elbows out about all that. And then on top of that, the other company whose initials is going to escape me right now, with their discount comics service or something like that, they are not very well liked. They don't have, as far as I understand, a storefront. I need to do more reading before I say that with certainty, but I think they're just an online wholesaler. And so they're a discount sailor, sorry, not a wholesaler. So they sell steeply discounted books, sort of like what Amazon does, and compete for sales with retail shops that can't afford to sell that cheap. They don't much like now having to compete on two fronts with these people shifting it into distribution. There's real questions about whether the distribution, the discounts that they can get through these distribution channels will be worth it. And especially for Canadian retailers, so that's my particular beat and interest, is when we look at our shipping, we have terrible problems with cost of shipping in Canada. It makes a lot of things difficult, and it would definitely eat into any remaining profit margin that's starting to look like. I don't have like conclusive proof of that, but this is a recurring theme from the retailers that I've been talking to, which I'm getting to. There are worries about. Some people are enthusiastic to have the opportunity to keep things going anyway, but a lot of people are looking at it very concerned. A lot of them are not appreciating the move. I'm working on a whole article about it because I started thinking about it and asking around, and I saw the Brian Hibbs post. So look up Brian Hibbs. He's a San Francisco comics retailer, and he wrote a pretty thorough explanation for why, from a retailer's perspective, it's not a good situation. A lot of them are not very happy with DC right now for it, and there's a lot of sweating. Some of the retailers I talk to aren't happy that people are so aggressive. They want to see something happen, which I can understand, but I think there's some pretty valid concerns too. So anyway, I decided to write them all. Not all of them, but I tried to find like about 5 or 6 retailers for every big city in Canada, which is to say about 4 or 5 cities, and then a couple from a lot of small communities along the way, and a lot of major prominent retailers and some small mom and pop operations. Tried to get a wide swath. Seriously could not have the time to write everyone, but I wrote a lot, about 30, and I'm starting to hear back from some of them. I don't imagine I'll hear from all of them necessarily, but the handful of responses have been interesting, a couple very insightful and thoughtful, and I think a lot of them are kind of aware of, so there are a lot of people in the indie market, for example, who kind of are excited by the idea of Dimond losing its monopoly. Dimond as a distributor has been kind of the only game in town for a long time. There have been a few that sort of work off in little fringe categories like Last Gasp. I think they are maybe still working in direct sales, but I don't think they do distribution anymore. I could be wrong about that though. But that's very much also very particular indie underground alternative. I guess they probably would carry what we consider literary graphic novels nowadays too, but these days there are book distributors that go to bookstores that comic shops do order from, and then there is the direct market, and the direct market is pretty much Dimond Comics. And there are good videos on YouTube about the history of the direct market. You should look them up. I watched a couple fairly recently, so I know you can find them. It's not got a long history, actually. So it's started like in the 50s, I think, or 60s, something like that. And I actually don't even think it was necessarily that old. The actual direct market came later. There was just like some of the first comic shops that the direct market started getting built for. Came in the 50s and 60s. And then as you got on later on, because before that it was all newsstands, pretty much, and maybe bookstores, perhaps. But the contemporary direct market started off with a bunch of distributors, and then there was a thing called the distribution war in the early 90s, which was right in my days in the business, first starting out. I make myself sound so old, but I am almost 50. The distribution wars kind of did a bunch of things. So when I started getting excited about making comics, it was the 80s, and the black and white boom was happening. You saw all sorts of really amazing things happening in comics. And you want to check out some really interesting stuff, check out the Cartoon Kayfabe guys. The Cartoon Kayfabe. Is there a third word in that name? It's a YouTube channel. Type that. That'll be good enough. And the Ed Pisker and when I go to say a name, that's exactly when it blanks on me. And Ed, and it's funny, I've known Ed a shorter amount of time. Ed Pisker and Joe? No. Oh, my brain. You curse me, brain. Jim, that's right. Jim Rugg. I've known of Jim, and actually I think I met Jim way longer than I've been aware of Ed Pisker, so I'm embarrassed, as usual. However, yeah, what was I getting at? Those guys do some nice coverage of 80s black and white boom books. I've been thinking, I'm kind of, I don't want to totally copycat them, but I've been thinking about pulling books from my library and doing little walkthroughs of the books I like. I had a lot of comics in the 90s when I was working at Marvel and doing all that kind of stuff and had lots of money to blow and working animation. And turn that down. I'm just checking out to see the stream is working. Live videos are great. Oh my God, someone is very active in the chat. Do more challenges. No, thank you. So I read a lot of those books. Also read a lot of cool stuff that was coming up from the mainstream companies. Late 80s, early 90s, I started getting into the business pretty hard. Got in early 90s. Totally thinking I want to work on stuff like, Year One or Watchmen or one of these things. Not even because I thought they were the bomb. I actually really liked them. But I also saw other things that were possible, and I saw things like Signal and Noise, Violent Cases too. And I wanted to make comics that were more than just escapism. And I thought that would be the thing to do because of the black and white boom in the 80s explosion and creativity. And the distribution war, that's where I'm bringing it all back around, kind of killed it. It helped anyway. It definitely made it impossible for indie comics to do well. Part of the reason I was thinking of KFAB guys, they just talked to Steve Bissett on their channel, and he mentioned and reminded me of, because I lived through that. That was my youth. The crash that happened due to the distribution network collapsing and a lot of retailers going out, a lot of the retailers that carried more indie stuff, and people started sticking with what was dependable, and because they also wanted to maximize discounts they can get from particular publishers and all sorts of dynamics that I don't want to get bogged down in, made it unattractive for the retailers to order a lot of indie books, and that remains a problem. What's happening here? Am I frozen? No, I just paused the video by accident. A lot of people now are seeing Diamond get challenged, and they get excited about that because it looks like maybe that could open things up. It's possible, and change could be painful, and maybe good change could come of it, and change could still be painful for a lot of people all the same. And then sometimes the more I'm learning about the fine print of how this got done, it feels very rushed. It feels a little bit impatient. A lot of people are pissed off at DC for not being patient. I think one person provided me with a plausible argument insight for why DC wouldn't have been patient. There's been talk about, before the shutdown, whether or not Marvel or DC actually made money, and why would Disney and Time Warner keep them around. when books were still shipping and things were selling, actually they make a lot of money, but they made money. Um, I'm sure there's some years where one of those two companies was in the red for various reasons. Certainly, that's why a lot of IP got sold off back in the day. But in recent years, they've actually been keeping their head above water okay. These aren't companies that make a pile of cash, though, very often, especially not since the boom days. But they don't lose a pile of cash either. As a line item for the parent corporation, they're not usually a problem because they're small. So, as a source of farm talent, writers, artists, ideas, IP, they more than earn their keep, because you can also turn around and do blockbuster major media things like movies. And a lot of people in the comics world have been frustrated by the minimal amount of which movie success has spun off into retail success. It has some, but not the way people would like. And then but that's never really surprised me. I don't see why someone who goes to see a movie for a lark has to then turn around and be expected to commit to buying piles and piles of continuity that they don't know when to start and walk into. And then, of course, the companies try to do things to open things up and renew that, but it pisses off the regular people. And also, I just feel like too often it's all very rushed. And my pet peeve has been the monthly cycle, the monthly pamphlet. I think it kills a lot of creative potential that's in the business because they're just trying to keep up. There are all sorts of problems with the direct market, and a lot of people would like to see change, so there's a lot of people rooting it for it, but then there's a lot of people whose livelihoods depend on it, and change should be smart, but it's always going to be painful. I have a feeling the answer in the long run is going to be there will be no easy way to do it. So anyway, I wrote a bunch of retailers. I'm hearing back. I'm hearing interesting things. I'm going to try to organize an article around that along with the new C list for the next week. I was going to try to do it for this weekend, but it's going to be bigger work. So Monday, Tuesday, there was news. The Comic Legends, let me check, make sure I get the name right. Comic Legends Legal Defense Fund, is that the name? Oops. What does it stand for again? This is the Canadian, Comic Legends Legal Defense Fund. So it's the Canadian Comics Legal Defense. And one of the board members, I think that's who it was, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Jay. A retailer that I'd written tagged me about Jay saying that they were discussing trying to help retailers out. There will be news on Monday. So comics folks, look there to see what's happening. I know that some retailers I talked to are also getting, in some cases, support from their community and customer support, community support in that sense, but also a few of them are saying that they think that, well, not tailored to them per se, the government's trying in Canada. I think the general take from at least my quarter in Canada has been that far from perfect, the Canadian government's been putting a good effort in trying to keep on top of things. And so there's a lot of people pushing for it too, and that's important. We keep doing that. Oh, more Comix Jam pages getting posted. Okay. How long have I been rambling on now? What's my focus? 29 minutes. That's good. Dropping things. So, yeah. This came up during the jam. I've been getting a lot of work done, but not a lot of drawing done, which is kind of okay because I had to step back and assess. And last time I did a process podcast, I'm pretty sure that one of the focuses of it was the decision to pause Mind Engine and put off publishing it because the festivals that it was going to be published at weren't happening. One of them kind of is. It's the one that's going to happen virtually, but So FBDM is doing a virtual festival, and I'm sticking with that. Although I might release stories and stuff, and I've got a story coming out in an anthology, Letters of Montreal, or Letters to Montreal, but the it seemed like it was a better idea to just take a pause on trying to release the book, and that gave me time to relax and sit back and also absorb everything that's been going on. And a lot of us talked about how we're not even if we're working, we're not being as productive, and I think people are preoccupied, which is to be expected in this situation. It is kind of akin to something I teach in my class a lot. So I try to get my students to begin learning the lesson that perfect is not particularly useful when you're in learning mode, especially because you're just trying to figure out how to get it right. And that's fine, but if you're trying for perfect all the time, you're not going to relax and learn from your mistakes. So you need to step back and not be so emotionally pushing towards some sort of perfection, but to allow things to evolve and sketch and explore and mature. And that sounds all very vague probably now that I listen to myself saying it, but no, there's a real thing to that, that you can't rush a thing. You have to solve the details. And so like my pencil drawings vary. Sometimes I do them very loose and then finish it in the inks, but it has more to do with how complex or simple I keep the work. If it's more complex, I have to spend more time resolving a higher resolution of problems in the rough so that I can do that improvisational ink and still get the detail I'm after, and balance it. And with digital, you can always erase stuff if you overdo it, but it takes more time. That slows things down. So I tend to just do more clean roughs, or more, not clean roughs at all. They're not clean, more detailed roughs. I go to a higher level of resolution, working out, solving the problems of world building and location and perspective and pantomime, expression, gesture, and get a rough figurative drawing that has most of the structure planned, and then in inking mode I can just embellish and enhance, and that's more efficient than and people I know who draw much faster. I mean, it makes sense. They have simpler, cleaner styles because that's, and we'll have conversations like that. Don't you ever want to just draw more simply, Max? Because that would be so much. It's like, probably, yeah, it would be simpler. I just don't. Very rarely, when I'm doing the jams, I can kind of just do quick and dirty because they're just doodles. And so that's kind of part of it, though, is you set the bar and your expectations. When I make my own comics, I'm driven to, I'm inspired to do these more elaborate things. And it's not smart business sense at all. It's why I don't do it as my mainstream and source of income. I do illustrations and teach and murals occasionally and other sort of kinds of, I bring the same level of involvement and commitment to the work, but they're shorter indentures, less time involved, so intense and like to be paid appropriately, but it's a couple of days, a week, or something like that. Studio animation work was definitely faster and looser, partially because of the nature of the work. The commercial constraints on animation for samurai cartoons, especially when a lot of the rendering was being done overseas for probably not great pay, was that they wanted stuff that was fast and easy to draw. And that's when I learned to put away my rulers and not overwork things. And I've kept the free hand even when I do get very busy and detailed. But it taught me about the value of simplification. So I'm not against it. But when I sit down to do a story, I'm trying to build all this texture and meta information. I like to be minimal with my text, or at least selective, and try to have the picture do a lot of the work. And that involves more rendering. Anyway. Meander. I'm not sure how I got into details. Do you ever? I think it's time for bed. It was a good Comix Jam. I'm going to be hosting those. Keep an eye out. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to join us for a Zoom Comix Jam here in Montreal. Even if the FBDM folks don't go for it, I'm going to definitely do another Salon BD Montreal Comic Salon event, which is basically a jam. But then I'm really curious about this idea of using the breakout rooms, conferences, and like one-on-one conversations, and like set up a lounge and set up a couple of conference rooms. When you do the Zoom thing, you have to kind of plan it out before when you launch it. Jeff Ellis was just telling me. So you'd have to like design, structure it, schedule it, everything like a regular conference. But yeah, I like this idea. Do you like this idea? Let me know. If you think that my videos are amazing and I should do more challenges, well, I'm sorry to break it to you, I will not be doing challenges. But like the videos and smash it, smash the liking. No, don't smash it. That's very aggressive. Stroke the like button and saddle up with a subscribe, and consider tipping the waiter over at Patreon, and wash your hands when you go outside. I was gonna put one on, but wear a mask. Not because you're going to keep from getting sick. You don't want to give people your goodies. Sweet dreams.